Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC, and today we're going to be exploring share sheets within our SwiftUI app so users can share anything, text, URLs, even images. So here's what we're going to be building today. It's very basic and we just have some placeholders, but we can choose to share. Let's say if we wanted to share text, this has a little text symbol up here. We'd be sharing Swift is awesome. On the simulator, we don't really have a whole lot of options to share with other people, but on an actual iPhone you would see people from your messages, Discord, email, and things like that. We can choose to share a URL here, where I'll be sharing the developerapple.com placeholder or an image as well. Now we'll be doing all of these with placeholders, but this is something where you can use variables or data from your app to actually share that out. And I'm going to show you an example from my app that I have on the App Store, WordSage. So in my app, when the users correctly guess the word, then you have their little entry, and I also have the share button at the bottom here. So when I press this, it actually has a customized message. And I could choose to share this with people who I text with. I'm probably blurring them out for privacy. And we can also choose to messages, send it mail, some other apps that I might use. We can even copy it. But if you were to start a new message here, you can kind of see in the text box down here, in my app, I am tracking how many tries it took the users to guess the word, how long their streak is, and how long their highest streak is as well. And at the bottom, I'm even plugging the App Store link, so you can actually use different variables or information in your app in the share sheets. You can also make it a strict link. We'll take a look at images. So maybe, from someone's journal entry, if they want to share an image that they have there, it's totally up to you. We're just going to be going over the basics today. And if you want to in your app, as like a little extra polish, you can choose to have the users share those with their friends or family. So let's go ahead and break it down to something that we can use in our SwiftUI app, and we'll dive on in. Alrighty, let's go ahead and open up Xcode, and we're going to be creating a new project. We're going to be selecting an iOS app. We're going to hit next. We're going to make sure we're on SwiftUI. We're actually going to be using the smallest amount of UIKit in this one just to help us with our activity sheet. But we are going to be making sure our interface is on SwiftUI, and you can call it whatever you like. I'd also suggest just adding this. Usually that's kind of the last step in any of your applications, but if you're starting from fresh, make sure you're on SwiftUI. Let's create that project. Before we start designing the interface, on the left side in our project navigator on Xcode, we're going to go ahead and create a new empty file. And we're going to call this one ShareSheet, and this is going to be controlling the UI activity view controller, which is like UIKit under the hood. We're not doing anything with storyboards today, do not worry. First thing we're going to be doing is importing SwiftUI, and we're also going to import, I can type it right, UIKit. So this is going to be a SwiftUI compatible wrapper for UIKit's UI activity view controller. And why do we need UIKit? Well, SwiftUI doesn't have a native share sheet yet. And even in my other projects, I kind of have my UIKit under the hood, even if they're a SwiftUI project. So this essentially allows us to bridge UIKit functionality into SwiftUI apps in a super clean, even reusable if you want to drag this file into any other project way. So we're first going to establish a struct, and we're going to go ahead and call it ShareSheet. And we're going to conform this with a colon to the UIViewControllerRepresentable. I'm going to use my autofill complete there, and it's also going to add the little squiggly braces as well. We're then going to create two variables. The first one is mandatory, the second one is optional, and this first one is going to be the activity items. And we're going to conform this to an array of any with a capital A. So this is essentially going to be the content that we do want to share. The second variable is optional, and this is going to allow us to add any custom app specific actions. So I'm going to call this one application activities, one word, application activities. And we're going to use our square brackets here, and we're going to make it a UI activity. Now we're also going to add the question mark outside the square brackets and have it equal nil. Next, still within our structure, we're going to add a function, and this is going to be what's called in order to create the share sheet. So we're going to say function make UI view controller, and we're going to use our autofill here, and we're going to have the context. The context, return some UI view controller, except we're going to be changing this UI view controller here to UI activity view controller. And you'll know that you have spelled it right because the color will update. Next, we're going to be adding our code, and we're just going to be using our return keyword, and the Apple AI is doing a really good idea of what we want to return, which is going to be the UI activity view controller. And then within the brackets, we're going to be having those activity items, which is just going to reference the activity items we created here within our variable. And we're also going to be having the application activities, which is going to conform to that other variable of application activities. So that's why we had set up those variables. So now we're allowed to properly pass all that information through. Now we do have an error that we do not conform to the protocol, and you can either use the fix stubs. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and type it out. This is something that's totally not needed. So we're actually going to just keep the function blank, but essentially we just need to include the update UI view controller, but we're just going to reference it and not actually have anything happen. So we're going to create a function outside of the other one, still within the structure, call it update UI view controller. I'm going to use the autofill feature there. It's going to save so much time. And where it says code, you can either just delete this or you can just include a blank comment. But this is just so we can satisfy the protocol condition. Totally not needed. We're not doing anything with it. So even though this looks a little UIKit-ish, this wrapper makes the ShareSheet feel native in SwiftUI. It's super duper reusable. You can just give it content and present it as a sheet. So let's go ahead and hop on over to our content view, and we're going to be designing our user interface as well as how the users can select what information they want to share. You can obviously take what I'm making today and amplify it a lot more. In my app, it grabs users' variables, their streaks, and things like that. But hopefully by learning the basics, you'll see how you can apply your own custom code to this template. We're also going to be importing UIKit at the very top of our file here. And we're actually, before our structure, going to be making an enum. This is because for this template, we're going to be managing different kinds of content we might want to share. We're using an enum, so it's very easy to toggle between options within a segmented picker, makes our code cleaner and a lot more extensible. So let's go ahead and create an enum with the enum keyword, and we'll call these our share types. And these are going to be strings, and they're also going to be case iterable. Go ahead and add our brace, and we'll add our cases, and our first one will be text, the second one will be a URL, and finally we'll be having an image. Then still within our enum, we're going to add a variable of content here, and we're going to have this conform to any, just like we did within our actual share sheet. We're then going to add a brace, and because we're using an enum, it makes a lot of sense to also be using a switch. And we're going to have this switch just be self, lowercase self in this scenario. We're going to add another brace and hit return. And this is where we're going to have all the cases. So in the case of text, so we'll do .text. What do I want to be shared with the text? So in this case, we're going to say return. Then we're going to use our square brackets. And this is where we're going to input the text. So I'm just going to go ahead and say SwiftUI is awesome in mine. We'll also handle the case of the URL. So we'll do .url. Going to go ahead and return, and anytime we're returning anything within these cases, we're going to be using these square brackets. So I'm going to go ahead and define a URL. Then within the brackets, I'm going to say that it's a string, and then I'm going to include the string. So if we wanted to do the developer.apple, you know, for this example, maybe I'll do a little bit of self-promotion, and I'll put my YouTube channel in this one. There we go. So now I have a URL that I can share with people. And let's go ahead and do one more case, which will be our image. So case.image. Again, really good idea to use the enum and switches together. Now with the image here, we're going to go ahead and do an if let statement. We're going to have our image equals UI image, and we can actually pass along a system name. If this is an image stored in a variable, if you have images like the app logo in the app, you can instead use those images, or even if it's one that someone has taken. If you're interested in learning about how to take and store photos, you can check out my tutorial on how to use the camera in SwiftUI. Otherwise, I'm just going to be sending the system name star.fill here. We're then going to add another brace, and we're going to return the image. Wonderful. And because we are using if let, we're going to go ahead and create an else to catch anything in case there is no image. And we'll go ahead and return no, let's do it as a string, no image available. Wonderful. We should be good to go because we are using a system image, but it's always good to handle any errors gracefully so the app doesn't freeze or crash. Oh, and in our URL, yes, we should force unwrap this. So outside of the bracket, but still within the squares. So after your kind of URL, we are going to be adding the exclamation point here. So essentially what we've set up is each case returns its actual data to be shared. Why is this important? Well, centralizing this logic keeps the main view tidy and lets us add more share types very easily much later on. We'll just create a case in the enum and then update our switch statement afterwards. You can even do this in a separate Swift file. I like to just have it at the top of my content view or whatever view I'm sharing from. In our main view here, let's go ahead and create some state variables. So the first one is going to be tracking whether or not we're showing the share sheet. So we'll say state private var, we'll say show share sheet. You can also call it ActivityView if you want. I like calling it share sheet. For the longest time, I thought that's what it actually was called, but it's activity. Oh well, close enough. We're going to be setting this to be false when the view is loaded, and when we want the share sheet to be activated, we're going to set this value to be true. We're then going to also track what share type is currently selected. You might even want to just have buttons dedicated to sharing a URL, sharing an image, or text. In my case, I'm going to be using these segmented controls. So we're going to create a state private variable once again, and we're going to call it selected item to share. Then we're going to add a colon, and this is going to be a share type, which is our enum we created above. And then we're also going to have equals .text as our default. Then we're also going to have a private variable, which is going to hold the actual content being passed into the share sheet. So this is important because we need to update this when the user taps the update button that we had on our example. You can also choose to update this on your share button in your app as well. So we're going to create a state private var, and we're going to call this one share content, which is going to conform to any. We're also going to have this equal a default, and we'll use our square brackets here. Within the square brackets, we're going to go ahead and include our string of hello from SwiftUI. So we kind of have that default. Wonderful. Now let's really quickly design our UI. I'm just going to get rid of our placeholders here, but still keep the VStack. Why not? And before the VStack, let's go ahead and right click on it, and we'll do embed. And in this container, we're going to go ahead and make it a navigation view. So now our VStack is properly wrapped within the navigation view. This way we can navigate to that share sheet and kind of have that pop up. I'm going to be using a picker in order to have the user, choose their share type. So I'm going to include share type within the string, and then I'm going to make the selection be our binding variable of the selected item to share. Then go ahead and add a brace. I'm then going to add a for each. And within the brackets, this is where we're going to be including our share type, again referencing that enum, and we're going to do the dot all cases. You could choose to include or exclude cases if you really like. And then we're going to add an ID, which is just going to be our /.self. Outside of the bracket, we're going to add a brace, and we'll say type in. And then this is where we're going to have our text, which would be the type dot raw value dot capitalized. And we can see here we have our little option selection of text, URL, or image. I don't love this style of picker, so I'm going to go outside of the braces of the picker here, and we'll use our dot notation to change how it looks and feels. We can do that with the dot picker style, and I love a dot segmented controller. I don't know, it feels clean. I love having all the options and just kind of selecting them that way. Let's also add some padding. We'll make it horizontal so it's not so clustered on the screen here. And now we're going to add a button, which is going to actually update the share content based on that selection. If you're only showing one type of data, you can just have the button handle this already. But because I'm showing you how to share different types or even different messages, I find this to be easiest. So we'll say update share content. Go ahead and add our brace. We're going to have our share content equals the selected item to share dot content. Wonderful, and we're going to be adding another button, which is going to trigger the share sheet. So we're going to create a button, but we're doing it differently than the one we've created above. We're instead going to add our brace, and we're going to set the show share sheet, which is this private variable we made all the way up here. We're going to have this equals true. Now we are getting an error because our button doesn't have any style. So outside of the first brace, we're going to add a label, a colon, add another brace, and this is where we can add a label for our button. I'm going to go ahead and call this share. We can also add a system image. I think the square arrow and up is what we want. I mean, that's what Apple Intelligence is suggesting, so hopefully it's the correct one. And we could also add some things like the font. Let's set this to be title or title 2, maybe title's too big. You know, any customization you want to do here. If you want to add a background, you know, even set the color. Let's just have this one be purple. And then we want the foreground style for the text. Let's set this to be .white. And we can add some corner radius as well. Fans of the channel know I love me some corner radius. Cool, and after the padding down here, let's also add a navigation title. Why not? We can call this one sharing or share example. The probably second most important step is actually having the native share sheet appearing and using our wrapper. So we're going to do the dot sheet is presented within the brackets. And this is where we're going to reference our binding. So it's asking for a binding variable. And we're going to be doing the show share sheet we created above. We don't need any of the content here. We can go ahead and delete that from our placeholder, including the comma. After this, we're going to add a brace. And this is where we're going to have our share sheet with a capital S, the structure we're referencing. And we're going to be passing through the activity items, which is going to be the share content. So let's go ahead and really quickly test this out. I'm going to press the share button. And you can see that we have our text, which is represented with this kind of A and the text selection mouse icon. On the preview, you can just choose to copy. If we run this on the simulator, we might have a couple more options. This is definitely one of those things that you want to test on a simulator or on a real device if you can. You can even see how you can send messages to people, and even if it's like a high score, they'll be like, what are you saying? What are you talking about? But you'll be able to see how it works in real time a little bit more clearly. Okay, now that our view has booted up, let's go ahead and update the share content. It should be on text by default, and you'll see that our share sheet kind of appears. We can even add it to reminders. So let's go ahead and do that. It just puts in the title, hello from SwiftUI. Let's add it. Again, on the real device, we can test the sharing a little bit better. Let's do the URL one now. Because it is a URL, you can see we can even add it to reading list. We can add it to our reminders. In this case, it adds the link here. And then let's also see how our image works. Again, you might want to have different buttons for these different shares. You can assign this image to contacts, print it, create watch face, save to files, right? If we put it in our reminders, oh, I guess we need an Apple account on the simulator. I'm going to go ahead and also show you how this looks on my iPhone, just to give you a better idea. So I have it loaded on my actual iPhone device here. So let's go ahead and have it be the text. You can ignore those little messages in the console, nothing that's going to be breaking it. So we have our SwiftUI is awesome. If we were to press the text message, we can see it down here. Again, I'm just blurring out people for privacy. Let's go ahead and try the URL. Add to reading list. It even has like little thing, NDC, that's my YouTube channel. See in the messages, oh, it even has like little embedded link with my logo. It's really cute. I didn't even know we would do that. And finally, let's try out the image. Go ahead and share that. And then we have our little SF symbol. Should I just randomly text this to someone? To be like, why are you sending me this? So these are the different basic ways of sharing those 3 different main types of data. Now, because I talked about it a little bit earlier, what if we do want to share some of that information, maybe a username or a high score? Let's go ahead and create a state private variable on our content view. For my example, I'm going to do a username, but you can of course make this anything that you have as a variable for the user. So let's call this username, and I'm just going to have this equal an empty string. Then I'm going to add a text field. So let's go ahead and grab a text field, or you can type it out the old-fashioned way. I like to do both. Instead of the placeholder, let's have enter your name to share. And for the text value, this is going to be that username binding we created above. Now, before we add this username to our share type, we are going to need to update our enum just a little bit. So see here where we have our variable content here, we're instead going to be changing this to be a function. So it's going to be function content. And then within our parameters, we're going to be passing as well. We're also going to be passing along a using username, which is going to be a string value. And then instead of our colon, we're going to be returning any. So if you are going to be using string interpolation, this is how you're going to be able to modify it a little bit more. So here where we have our SwiftUI is awesome, let's add a dash so it's kind of seeming like someone's quoting it. And let's add our string interpolation with our / in our brackets. And let's reference our variable of username. You'll notice before we can run our program, in our button to update the share content, we need to fix the value type. So all we have to do for this is add a bracket at the end and say using, and this is where we're going to also have that username. Any of the variables that you're going to be using, this is how you can update it for string interpolation. I would make my UI look a little bit cleaner too, to be honest. So maybe with the text field, we can change the text field style to be rounded border so it sticks out a little bit more. This isn't supposed to be the most amazing UI in the world. Okay, let's go ahead and add our name to share. So I'm going to do NDC Swift Mastermind, hit return, or enter on the simulator. We're going to update our share content, and then we're going to press the share button. And here we can see SwiftUI is awesome, NDC Swift Mastermind. Pretty cool stuff there. So if you want to use string interpolation, pass along variables, data, different images, these are the different ways that you can do it and you can include it. So everything here is SwiftUI except the one sheet at the very end, which opens up UIKit with the share controller behind the scenes. All we need to do is pass it in as an array of things to share. You can replace the picker and buttons with your own design and reuse this logic anywhere in your app. This is something that I typically add later in an app development process, high scores, custom messages and things like that. So that is all for today. If you found this tutorial to be useful, let me know in the comments below, as well as let me know what app you're working on and why you want to add an ActivityView controller to it, or the ShareSheet. That's what I thought it was called for the longest time. ShareSheet sounds so much cooler. ShareSheet. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Dream big, code bigger, and have an amazing rest of your day.